Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Derek Goldman, and I'm the Montana Policy and Regulatory Associate with the Northwest Energy Coalition. Tonight's event is a nonpartisan event sponsored by the Montana Environmental Information Center, Western Environmental Law Center, Climate Smart Missoula, and the University of Montana Office of Sustainability. Thank you for coming tonight. You can sign up in the lobby for updates from these great organizations. And also special thanks to Families for a Livable Climate for offering complimentary kids activities out in the lobby. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you need to use the restroom, it's out the door and to the left down the hall. Remember to silence your cell phones. Our speakers tonight will be about 20 minutes each, and then we're going to do questions. Shannon and Ben will be coming around the auditorium here with note cards, and you can write a question on your note card, and then as you see them walking around afterwards, you can, or during the presentations, you can pass your note cards to them, and they'll bring them up, and we'll get the questions in the queue. So we're here tonight to discuss one of the most important issues in Montana today: plans for the rapid development of data centers across the state, including one recently announced right here in Missoula County in Bonner. If you don't know, a data center, it's a large warehouse full of computer servers. They use lots of energy. They must somehow be cooled and kept from overheating. And importantly, they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And just to know what we're talking about, and as importantly, what we're not talking about, some boosters of data centers have said things like, well, this is about your Gmail account and where your messages are stored, or films that you want to watch on Netflix. And that's not what we're really talking about today, because this new generation of data centers uses exponentially more energy than the last generation of data centers. The new generation are running graphic processing units that are round the clock doing computations to train AI models, artificial intelligence. And if you will, you can view the data centers and the GPUs as the brains of the AI. They use the specialized hardware that process computations many times faster than the CPU in your laptop. Accordingly, they use many, many times more energy. So that's what we're talking about. An industry boom like what we're seeing with data centers isn't new to Montana. Since statehood, we've experienced booms like this, from the rise of the copper industry, the coal bed methane rush, the timber barons, the Bakken boom, the luxury real estate land grab, and other well-financed expansions of industry, all who viewed Montana as easy pickings. And Montanans have largely paid the costs in the past. We're still dealing with a legacy of metal mining pollution, pulp and paper mill pollution, farmers in eastern Montana who have fought oil and gas companies for the rights to their own water. And many of our lakes and streams have mercury fish consumption advisories on them. And in many ways, the AI data center rush feels similar to those booms of the past, a growing billionaire-backed industry seeking to monetize Montana's resources for private gain. And if we aren't diligent and firm in seeking strong sideboards around data centers, we could end up paying the financial and environmental cost, with the economic benefits largely accruing to out-of-state tech billionaires. And the time to do that is now, before they are built and operational. There are many implications for Montanans. Issues you'll hear discussed tonight include electric costs and reliability, water usage, transparency, and what data centers mean for our efforts to combat climate change. And tonight, I'm honored to introduce three of my personal heroes in Montana's environmental movement, who I've had the privilege of working with over the years. Three brilliant, passionate, committed activists with probably close to a century of combined experience working to protect public health and our environment. Combined. Amy Cilimburg, at the far end, is the Executive Director of Climate Smart Missoula. Barbara Chillcott is the Senior Attorney at the Western Environmental Law Center. And Anne Hedges, the Executive Director of Montana Environmental Information Center. So with that, watch out for the note cards coming around for your questions, and I will turn it over to Anne.
Thank you, Derek. I'm going to move this a little bit because I can't stand being this hemmed in. And I can't see my slides on the screen. Okay. I think that works better. Works better for me. Okay. And I just want to say, in case Derek didn't, that he's with the Northwest Energy Coalition, which is a regional organization that works on energy that we look to constantly for their expertise in so many arenas of the energy world that we don't have expertise in state to that degree. Energy efficiency and clean energy. Northwest Energy Coalition is a leader in the region. We're really lucky to have them. So thank you, Derek. I'm going to just move past what are AI data centers, because honestly, it feels like Derek just said it. They are warehouses full of computers. That's what they are. They're just big old warehouses full of computers that process everything really, really fast. The NVIDIA chip and large language models have completely transformed this industry. We have had data centers in this state and around the nation for decades. There's nothing new. As long as we've had computers, we've had data centers. What is new is the speed of processing, the ability to process an enormous amount of information in a very short period of time. That requires a lot of energy, and it requires a lot of water for cooling. So what we're seeing now, because of NVIDIA's chip and these AI tech bros who are moving forward at the speed of light, spending money in unprecedented ways. We have never had this kind of transformation in the electric world, at least. We've never seen this kind of investment in a technology before. This is unprecedented, and we are not ready to meet the moment. What's wrong here? Well, about a year ago, a professor from Harvard came out with a study, a report that really showed what's going on all over the country and how utilities are they're putting the costs of adding data centers to the electric system on the backs of customers. And he spelled it out in extracting profits from the public. That report was really just a calling out to everybody to start paying attention. And we did. We had a bill last session. It really helped us with that. We all now know what he was telling us over a year ago. And on the East Coast, just for example, when it comes to data centers, I want you to think about this number. In the summer of 2025, I think this might be wrong, but it says 2025, an East Coast market watchdog, so think Consumer Council, for the largest area of transmission in the United States, which is on the East Coast, a lot of eastern states, they calculated that 70%, or $9.3 billion in increased electricity costs over the past year, 1 year, was caused by data centers. Okay, that's 1 year. And today there was another announcement saying that these guys now have the ability to tell data centers they can't get power during emergencies because they are in crisis mode because of data centers on the East Coast and other places across the country. In Texas, which is known as ERCOT, data center demand spike could drive 79% of ERCOT price hike by 2027. 79% in Texas of cost increases because of data centers. We are driving a car off a cliff, and we have nobody here to protect us at the moment. So, I just want to talk the scale of what we're talking about, because like I said, we have never seen anything like this. And this is from the Department of Energy, right? This is December 2024, this Department of Energy estimate of how much energy we were going to need because of data centers. And as you can see, up until about the NVIDIA chip, until ChatGPT came online, we had a steady growth in data center growth, but it wasn't anything astronomical. Look at 2028, even the low-end estimate from the Department of Energy of what they anticipate our energy needs are going to be for data centers. It is mind-numbing to think that we would have to provide that much power to these companies. And as the Idaho Sun said, energy demand for data centers is growing faster in the West than we can supply. It's that simple. We simply cannot supply this amount of energy. So let's talk for a second about baseline. Where are we? Where is Montana in this world? So, you know, for those of you who've been around for a little bit, like me, 100 years it appears, because, you know, Amy and Barbara are still young. I have been at MEIC for 32 years, so that's a chunk of change. But as you can see, this is about residential rates in Northwestern's energy system. And since we re-regulated in 2007, the green line on the bottom is really overall customer demand. So you're looking at customer demand, it's barely increased. It has not really changed that much over time. It's only changed 3.6%. But what has changed is our rates. So you can see that red line, ever since we re-regulated, our rates have been rising. They have risen 87% since we re-regulated. 87%. So that's astounding. But what's even more astounding is that since 2022, Northwestern's residential electricity rates have increased almost 40%. So if you are thinking that your bills have increased a lot, that's because they have. That's because we don't have regulators who are saying no to the utility, and the utility has learned it can come forward and ask for anything and pretty much get whatever it wants. This is a problem in the era of data centers. So what's happening in Montana? So in Montana, you can see that top line is just the average Northwestern customer demand. That's, you know, 750 or 60 average megawatts of power to Montana communities. And that's most of the state. Northwestern covers the majority of the state. But when you add the data centers that have been announced to that, you can see the bottom line. You have Sabi data centers for 250 megawatts. You have Atlas for 150 megawatts. It's a crypto operation that wants to start doing data centers because this is a lucrative arena. You have Quantica out in Broadview that wants to have 1,000 megawatt data center. That's more than every person in Northwestern's residential customer in Northwestern service territory needs. 1,000 megawatts is astronomical. You have Crombu, who we don't know what Crombu and Bonner is going to be. We don't know what Crombu is going to have another facility in this area because we've heard rumors that it is. So let's say it's 30, let's say it's 100, let's say it's 7. It doesn't really matter. And then Northwestern didn't tell us, but it told its investors in early February that they were working with 11 more data centers. 11. Now, we don't know the split because they're not being transparent. We don't know if that's in South Dakota. We don't know if that's in Montana. We don't know if it's a split between them. We don't know what that difference is. But we do know that Brian Bird has said that they are justifying all of these rate increases because of increased demand. And as you can see on that previous slide, it's not residential customers who are increasing their demand for energy, it's data centers. So what's going on nationwide? What's going on nationwide this is an analysis that was done by Karen Kirk. She works for Yale Climate Connections, and she did an analysis of 3 primary categories in every state of utility customer. You have your residential utility customers, you have your commercial utility customers, and you have your industrials like your refineries and your cement kilns. And you can see that up until about 2007, the rates for each one of those categories rose at about the same pace. And then something happened between 2007 and 2021, and you can see residential customers' rates across the country rose faster. They rose faster than commercial and industrial. I argue commercial and industrial have wonderful attorneys that sit before utility commissions and make strong arguments in their favor, and we are not adequately represented as residential customers in these proceedings, either in Montana or any place else in the country, and our elected officials or our appointed officials are the ones who are making these terrible decisions on our behalf. But then in 2021, you see that line, the difference between those lines increase even more. Residential customers are getting hit. We are getting hit with an unfair burden of the increases in the electric system. And something has got to change because things these days are unaffordable. So what are the risks? So we hear a lot about this is so great. You hear that out of Great Falls, economic development councils, chamber of commerce. They all love data centers. They're going to bring in money. But what happens if this is a bubble? AI is going to solve the problem with AI, is my mantra, because AI is going to figure out how to do this better, how to use less electricity, how to use less water. Some of these guys, this is super duper speculative. I mean, everywhere in the country, these guys are putting in these interconnection queue requests. They're saying that they want to build this data center, and they're venue shopping. They're looking in multiple states to locate a facility, and not all of those facilities are going to come to pass. And what we've seen is some of these utilities invest as if they're a sure deal, and they aren't. And if these guys go away because AI is a bubble and the investment is unsustainable in this industry right now, it is. But if they go away for any number of reasons, what happens to all of the infrastructure that was built to accommodate them? The power plants, the transmission lines, the distribution lines, the community water systems. What happens? Who pays for that if these guys go belly up? We have a familiarity with that kind of boom and bust cycle in this state. And so we should be careful because investors are worried about it too. I could talk about this slide forever. I won't, because I talk too much. So I just want to say, who are these kind of data center people we're dealing with? And this is just a really quick example. We had a facility supposedly proposed for Jefferson County. Nobody in Jefferson County, which is right next to Helena, knew that. But this company had gone to President Trump and asked him for an exemption from the Clean Air Act so they could get their 500 megawatt gas plant online without going through the regular permitting process. That's what they asked. They asked for this same type of exemption for their facilities all over the country. Fortunately, data centers didn't receive the presidential exemption. Colstrip did, but they didn't. So that's at least a tick in our favor. But let me tell you, that's who a lot of these developers are. They are going to cut corners. They make money because they cut corners. They make money because they don't have to necessarily keep a promise that is not in writing. So one thing I love about this issue, in my 32 years at MEIC, I've never seen such a bipartisan issue. This is an issue that crosses party lines. We cannot make this political. This is an issue about people being able to afford their electric bills. This is an issue about irrigators having water in the summertime and not having the data center steal it. So you are seeing widespread concern. Ron DeSantis, he's doing great work down in Florida on data centers. Go figure. You have Al Olszewski, who is, Dr. Al's been running for office for a long time. And I disagree with him on almost everything, but he is calling for a moratorium on data centers because he gets it. He understands the threat that they pose to affordability in this state. You have the Texas Republican Party considering a resolution that read like I wrote it. This is the Texas Republican Party. And it is all about affordability and protecting existing customers in the electric system and protecting water resources. This is universal, and we need to treat it that way. So there's three primary challenges to data centers. The first one, of course, I'm going to talk about is energy. The second one is water. And the third one is community impacts. And these are three issues we need to solve for. Because I'm not here to say no AI ever, that we don't want any data centers. That's not my line. My line is we need to get the regulations in place to protect ourselves before they come here. We can't sit back and pretend like maybe it won't happen here if we say we want a moratorium. You can want a moratorium till the cows come home, but you have to get that past the governor. So how about we also work on some regulations that hem these guys in and hold them to their promises. Let's hold them accountable. So who's in charge here? It is not a single decision maker. Your people who are in charge, the governor, he's a tech bro, right? He is a data center guy. He has gone around the world asking people to come to Montana and build data centers. He has an energy task force that is 80% about data centers and getting data centers built in Montana. So the governor is not going to be any help. You have the Public Service Commission. You have the legislature, critical role. We need to all be talking to legislators about this. You have your county government. Missoula is in an enviable position. You guys have the best regulations in the state and the local level for data centers. Congratulations. You have electric co-ops. Yes, thank you. Absolutely. You have electric co-ops who are in charge of any data centers that come into their service territory. If there's something outside of town here, it could be co-op country, not Northwestern's. And you have the judicial branch. And I think there's going to be some cases going up to the Montana Supreme Court on data centers. That's just a guess. So what has the legislature done about this? Well, it's not pretty. The legislature in 2017 passed a bill that said data centers, at that time it was all about cryptocurrency, they get the lowest tax rate that there was, 0.9% property tax. At that time, you as homeowners were paying 1.5%. They were paying 0.9%. So they came in under the radar, talked about economic development, and got a sweetheart deal from the legislature in 2017. 2023, the legislature simply said data centers and cryptocurrency have to be treated exactly the same. Not a big deal, but it's important in this arena. And then in 2025, there were a number of bills. The one that passed was by Katie Zolnikoff, and it expanded that 2017 tax break to say not only is the data center and its equipment going to get that tax rate, it's also going to be a generation plant. So if you build a ginormous gas plant, you're going to get a really great tax rate on it. It was trying to incentivize data centers bringing their own resources, but the problem is if you bring a giant gas plant, the trouble only is starting when it comes to a data center. But they extended it to that. It's all their communication equipment. Anything that's associated with a data center gets a sweetheart tax break. We had a bill from the utility, 2 bills trying to cut the Public Service Commission out of the process. We killed those. I think we could crush those next session, not just hopefully kill them with our fingers crossed. We had a bill that Katie Sullivan carried for us that was just simple electricity reporting for data centers. It didn't get out of committee. I would never try to propose such a weak bill again, but I can tell you, next session, we're going to have more than just me and a couple former PSC commissioners testifying in favor of it. And then there's a study resolution. So what's the problem with data centers? This is a wonderful graphic. It's too small for you to read, but it's their size. It's an unusual size, and it creates all sorts of systemic problems in the grid. You have load characteristics like things we've never seen. We've just never seen anything like this. You know, you think about your refineries, they're big users of energy. They use about 50 megawatts or so. I mean, you know, they don't tell you that number, but that's pretty much what it looks like they're using. We're talking 1,000 megawatts here. We don't have any industrial users in the state at this scale. You have sensitivity to grid disturbances. So data centers go like this all the time. They're ramping up and down constantly. And when they go offline, they can take the whole power grid with them. That was an emergency crisis in the PJM area in eastern United States. Not that long ago, where one guy tripped offline, one big data center tripped offline. And it was a crisis for the entire system. They were afraid they were going to have rolling blackouts. They did not expect it to happen. And that much load going offline all at once is not something the grid is designed to handle. Difficulty sharing data, that's called transparency. These guys don't want you or me to know anything. And then the prevalence. There are so many proposals out there that there's a couple things we really need to do urgently in order to weed out the speculators so we have a better understanding of how many proposals we're actually dealing with. Charge them money. So what's happening right now in Montana? And this is really important. We have, I guess it's not quite Montana yet, but there's a way to deal with data center electricity use, and it's something called a large load tariff. And that is something that the Public Service Commission has before it right now. Northwestern, well, we requested a large load tariff from the PSC back in November, and it did nothing with our request. And it was MEIC and a ton of partners, Climate Smart Missoula and Northwest Energy Coalition and others, and the PSC didn't do anything with it. Northwestern told the PSC it didn't have regulatory authority over it for a year, well, for 6 months. And then it said, we're going to come to you, don't worry about it, we'll get to it. 6 months later, they file a large load tariff with the Public Service Commission. That was in early April, I believe it was. And their proposal is missing the primary, most important component of a large load tariff, and that's something called a separate rate class. So you heard me talk about residential customers, you heard me talk about industrial customers, and we heard me talk about commercial customers. Commercial customers are very different than data centers. Data centers are unique in the energy world. They need their own separate rate class. Because what happens when they have a separate rate class is we can combine all the costs that they impose on the system and attribute them to them and make them pay those costs, as opposed to sharing those costs across all the other customer groups. Because I know who here wants to subsidize the richest men in the world. Anyone? Okay, right. So we need a separate rate class, and Northwestern's proposal did not have that. But other states are doing exactly this. Oregon just did it. The Virginia Commission just did it. There are ways to establish a separate rate class. We are going to be arguing before the Public Service Commission that we absolutely need a separate rate class. So there's connection costs. So, data centers cause, this is from their, the Union of Concerned Scientists. This is again in the PJM area. They cause transmission costs in the millions of dollars that were approved in 2024. $4.3 billion of transmission upgrades and investments were required for data centers. That was 1 year's worth of costs. That's how much investment is necessary to bring data centers onto the system. You can look and see what these various states are paying. Ohio, $1.2 billion of investments. This is for data centers. A Union of Concerned Scientists isolated what these projects were, and this was 1 year's worth of investments because of data centers. Who here wants to have their rates increase this much to subsidize the electric connection costs of data centers? I can guarantee nobody. Okay, so what do we know? That's what we know. This is what Northwestern has provided to the Public Service Commission and the public. The PSC has seen an unredacted version, I assume. Whether they've read it is a different story. But they have seen these agreements, but nobody else can see them. So these are the agreements Northwestern has struck with data centers in Montana, and they are useless to us. Basically, the only thing that isn't crossed out is something that says it's not, or this is confidential information. That's what we're working with. Northwestern just filed its large load tariff, and it doesn't actually want to go to the PSC for anything under 50 megawatts. So Bonner, Northwestern wouldn't have to go to the Public Service Commission and prove that that facility coming online won't harm existing customers. Northwestern could have 15 of these 49 megawatt facilities and never go to the PSC under Northwestern's tariff. Northwestern, for loads that are even larger than that, wouldn't go to the Public Service Commission or tell the public anything until the Energy Service Agreement, step 4 in a 5-step process. They then get to keep it all secret from the public. That's what Northwestern has done. This is their proposal. And I have gone through their proposal and I've looked at the major components that you want in a large load tariff. These are, I've looked all over the country. What are the major components? You want to make sure that they are financially bonded so that they have financial assurances if they go away, that they're still going to pick up the tab for all the investments we may have made on their behalf. We want to make sure that existing customers are not going to be subsidizing them. We want to make sure that there's minimum charges on them. There is a slew of things that other states have done that could protect us. We don't have those things. All we have right now is a Public Service Commission, its obligation to provide oversight to Northwestern Energy and verify it's not going to harm existing customers. That is insufficient. We need more rules to make sure the PSC doesn't cave into Northwestern Energy and cause us problems. Northwestern Energy's tariff proposal, I've highlighted in red, puts Northwestern in the driver's seat for every decision. So every decision about these things, Northwestern gets to decide. Northwestern gets to go back and negotiate a final agreement with these guys. I'm happy to share this slide with anyone who wants to see it. I'm happy to share their large load tariff. I'm not making this up. Northwestern has put forward a large load tariff that is not transparent to the public. It's not transparent to anybody in the energy world who wants to see whether there's sufficient resources in the system to actually, mess around with load a little bit, maybe have another business come online that's not a data center. We need better than this. And so we will be intervening in that docket along with a number of other organizations before the PSC saying Northwestern it should not be in the driver's seat. It is a monopoly utility. It's soon to be an 8-state monopoly utility if we're not lucky, and and we will lose some control over it. We need to have these things in place now. A large load tariff is simply a set of rules by which the utility provides power to somebody. And we need a really strong large load tariff to protect us from these guys. And I know I'm over time, but I cannot walk away from this without mentioning nuclear, because a lot of people are saying the new generation of nuclear is going to save us. It's great. This is wonderful. It's a whole new technology, and it has no waste, and they don't even use uranium, and they're all small, and they're modular, and we can like plug and play. None of that is true. They still use uranium. They still need fuel. They still have waste. That waste still has to be stored on site forever, and nobody's going to have one small little reactor someplace. They are going to plug and play 10 or 20 of these reactors together to form a big reactor. And then it's going to be stuck in our community serving a data center. And what Northwestern wants, it wants nuclear, and it just got a peaker plant. And no, the things circled in red there are not the things that Northwestern wants just because Northwestern wants them. It's the things Northwestern wants because they are the most expensive energy resources on the system. And the more money the utility spends on acquiring a new power plant, the more money we have to pay it over time. So its investors, its shareholders want them to spend money because then they can charge us more. That's how they make money. So the idea of building a nuclear or a gas peaking plant, the most expensive generation resources in the system today, according to the gold standard for analyzing the cost of energy from various generation sources, it says that the two things Northwestern wants the most are the most expensive things to provide power. There are so many cheaper ways to do it. We should insist the utility looks at those. So I want to pass it off to Barbara. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. So again, my name is Barbara Chillcott. I'm an attorney with the Western Environmental Law Center based in Helena. I have spent most of my legal career in water, a lot of time in water rights. I worked for the state for a while doing water rights work, and so it seems that I can't really get away from that issue, and so I've been thinking a lot about water as it pertains to AI data centers and the use there. So I would have to say when I come to Missoula, I see so many familiar faces, and I see some awesome people in the audience that I know from all kinds of different areas of my life. So I really am so thankful that you're all here to learn about this issue, and I have a lot of hope that you're going to take all this awesome information that we're sharing and act on it. So you've all probably heard and read stories about AI data centers consuming, guzzling up and discharging just millions and millions of gallons of water. One study published in November of last year from Cornell researchers estimated that U.S. data centers could annually consume as much water as 10 million Americans if depending on how fast the AI data center boom happens. Then we hear about proposals here in Montana, and it's kind of fuzzy, right? How much water is going to be used by these different facilities, and I've been a little frustrated just trying to figure out, just find some real numbers and data to kind of inform how to quantify the amount of water that will be used by these new demands. So I think there's a risk of overgeneralizing when you talk about data centers and water use, especially. It really just depends on a lot of factors and the technology used, whether it's air cooling or closed loop cooling, Importantly, what type of energy is generated to fuel the data center, whether it's fossil fuel based, which uses an enormous amount of water, or whether it's renewable energy. So there are a lot of different factors that go into the amount of water used. So the point is we really just need information, and I think we need information up front before these new projects kind of really get off the ground. So really my point in being here and the point of this talk is to elevate this issue of water use alongside energy use and community impacts that Anne mentioned of AI data centers, so we as a state can become more prepared for what's coming. We have a lot of examples from across the country of communities being faced with impacts from data centers that weren't prepared, and I think for a lot of those places it's almost too late to really get a handle on things. So I think, for all of us here, I imagine you're all here, and maybe some of you all value, or all of you all value our healthy rivers and streams and aquifers, and they really are just fundamental to our way of life in Montana. Whether we're irrigators or recreationists or municipal water providers, we obviously need water, and we don't actually have that much of it here. And I think we've all experienced what has now become the new norm of really low river flows in the summer. Clark Fork gets really low. Anne and I noticed on our drive here from Helena today that it's pretty full. I haven't seen it that full in a long time, and that's pretty cool. I imagine that's not going to be the case for the rest of the summer. So I think we just need to position ourselves to be in control of our own destiny. And if we decide as a state that AI data centers have a place here, then they come on our terms. And that means they really do need to recognize that we already value our water resources here, and we need those protected. So over the next few minutes, I'll provide a high-level overview of what we mean by water use in AI data centers, some facts about existing data centers that have fueled concerns about water consumption, including a couple of examples from Oregon and Utah. I'll then zoom into Montana, provide a very brief water rights 101, not to bore everyone, and share what is known, the little bit that's known about 3 of the data centers that have been in the news lately in Montana as far as water use goes. And then finally, I'll share some potential regulatory considerations for Montana. And interestingly, there are some really good examples from Florida and South Dakota. So let me just move forward here. So just basically describing the water footprint of an AI data center. There are 3 different kind of scopes of water use. The scope 1 water use is the water that's used for cooling in the facility, so to cool the servers. And that's what really can create those localized impacts that we are concerned with. Scope 2 water is the water that's used to generate electricity needed to power the site. And this is an enormous amount of water, or it can be, depending on the type of energy generation provided or used. Fossil fuel based, obviously, it uses a ton of water. So, and then the third kind of bucket of water use is the water used in the supply chain. So the water used to mine your rare earth minerals and create your chips and things like that. So to understand, I think, the whole footprint of a data center, you really need to understand those 3 components. But the scope 1 use is really kind of what we think about a lot when we're really looking at a data center at a very specific site using a specific water source, I think. Unless you have a co-located gas plant that might use a ton of water too, and then you have a lot of problems, I think. So I think, one thing that the research has shown is that over time, data centers consume more water. The chart goes up, as you can see, especially in this chart related to Google. There's a study out of Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory that U.S. data centers collectively consumed 17 billion gallons of water for cooling in 2023. In 2024, Google's AI data center in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and this is a hyperscale data center, one of those really gigantic ones, which drew approximately 1.4 billion gallons of water from the municipal supply there. Of that, roughly 1 billion was consumed and permanently lost to the system, and the remaining 4 million gallons was discharged. So you can see kind of, I think one thing we're seeing is that project proponents will come in and say, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to start off as maybe a 5 megawatt data center. And I should note that the amount of water used is really directly in proportion to the megawatts. And so, a 5 megawatt data center, like, okay, well, we'll use this amount of water, but the intention always, I would say probably always, is to expand that. And so you have to kind of look at what the predictions are to for those data centers to grow over time to get a sense of the amount of water used. Another report from last July from the Western Resource Advocate said if utility predictions on data center growth come to fruition, data centers in the 5 states of Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico combined could have an annual on-site consumptive water use of 13,700 acre feet, or 4.5 billion gallons of water. And so just as a sidebar, in Montana and a lot of the kind of Western prior appropriation states, we think in water in terms of the volume of water. We hear a lot about billions of gallons and millions of gallons. In the water right world, we talk about acre feet, and it doesn't sound as sexy, I don't think, or as like impactful when you say an acre foot of water, but just so you know, an acre foot of water is around 326,000 gallons of water, or enough water to cover an acre of land a foot deep. So, 1 acre foot is a lot of water. So, based on that report, by 2030, these 5 states data centers would consume close to 22,000 acre feet of water, which is enough to support almost 200,000 people a year. The other component of the question about water use in data centers is not only the amount of water they use or consume to cool or to generate energy, but also the wastewater that is discharged from the facility. And so there are a lot of questions about, what type of chemicals are used in these systems for cooling. And so I think one critical question is, when data centers come in, we really do need to know, like, what chemicals are you using? What do you anticipate discharging into the system? One of the primary pollutants that we would see from a data center is temperature or thermal pollution, because obviously the water is used for cooling. That water is going to be a lot warmer than what it was when it came from the ground or from the surface water source, and then it will be discharged back into the river. Most of you, I'm sure, who live around here know that we have a problem in the summer with low river flows and hot, warm rivers. Often in the past several years, we've had hoot owl restrictions go on our rivers, and that's because it's just too hot for the fish to compete, with our fishing and also survive. So I think, temperature is a big issue. Other potential pollutants are biocides, which control bacteria and algae in the system. They're also corrosion inhibitors, so they would discharge phosphates and nitrates, which would contribute to eutrophication and oxygen depletion, increasing any algae issues that we already have. Elevated total dissolved solids can get concentrated through evaporation cycles. Trace heavy metals could be in the coolant. There could also be some other kind of more AI-specific chemicals used that would contain forever chemicals, or PFAS, which is an emerging serious contamination issue across the country. So there are questions that would come with any data center. Would they have to apply for their own wastewater discharge permit under the Clean Water Act? Would they try to tap into another system, a municipal system, public water system, to discharge their wastewater into that system? Can that system handle that additional volume of water and the type of pollutants that might be contained in that discharge. What are the best available treatment technologies to treat this type of pollution? And does this project proponent intend to use those? So I think, one thing in Montana that strikes me is that we're already at a disadvantage in terms of our public water supply systems. In 2024, Montana received a C- for wastewater infrastructure from the American Society of Civil Engineers. And that's due to kind of the most of the systems are really old. They need to be renovated or reconstructed, and there's just not a lot of funding for local governments to do that. And so in other states, we've seen where these data centers kind of come online and intend to use an existing public water supply system or wastewater system. And the question becomes, who pays for the upgrades needed to kind of meet that need? And Anne mentioned a potential project, that kind of project that fell off the radar, we think, in Jefferson County and Boulder, Montana. And Boulder is already having kind of issues with their water system and really working hard to fund upgrades to the system. So if an AI data center came to a place like Boulder, Montana, or any of these other smaller communities that are dealing with really trying to finance these upgrades, which is really expensive, then there would be a big problem there unless there are some tools in place for the local government to require this new use to pay their own way. So I just want to provide a couple of examples of what we've seen in other jurisdictions about water use, and these will be quick. In the Dalles, Oregon, which is on the Columbia River, Google was embroiled in a 13-month legal battle to keep their water usage secret. The Oregonian newspaper somehow got information about their water usage and intended to publish it. The city of the Dalles actually sued the Oregonian to prevent their disclosing that information. It ended up getting disclosed, and Google, I think, kind of got out in front of it and voluntarily disclosed the amount. Eventually, the company disclosed that the data centers that they have in that area consume more than 25% of the town's water supply. The town didn't have enough water rights to fuel that or to provide that amount of water. And so one solution that they're looking at is there's been a federal bill that I think is either in process or has just recently passed that would transfer some federal land, Forest Service land in the Hood River National Forest to the city of the Dalles for a reservoir, and it also comes with water rights. And so they're trying to acquire and convert federal land to increase the water supply for this Google data center in the Dalles. So that's one example. This one really struck closer to home for me in Box Elder County, Utah. There is a proposed data center there called the Stratos Project, and it's put forward by Kevin O'Leary. I don't know, did you guys watch Shark Tank, or I've never heard of them, but there's a show called Shark Tank, and he's produces that. So, and he's very excited about this new ginormous data center and has really touted it to be one of the largest ones in the world. This data center is, as it says on the slide, it's slated for around 40,000 acres, which is like 2.7 times the size of Manhattan. It would consume more than 2 times the amount of energy that the whole state of Utah uses right now. 9 gigawatts. It's crazy. And the water it needs, again, the data, it keeps changing the numbers, but it needs up to 13,000 acre feet of water is one number that I've seen. They have already contracted with a ranch or an irrigator in the area to purchase 1,900 acre feet of water. That started through the process at the state, which is required to kind of change that water from an irrigation use to an industrial use. It received over 3,800 protests from the community, and the applicant just withdrew the application. And we think one reason that happened is because Utah just passed a law that limits the type of protest that can be made on water rights, and so on new water right applications. So the thought is that the project proponent says they're going to resubmit, and I think the point is that they'll get to receive fewer objections or protests. So, the 13,000 acre feet, to put it in the gallons, that's about 4.2 billion gallons of water per year that the project would require, at least with the numbers that are public right now. So, I mean, that hit home to me because, that could be, Montana, that could be, some farm ranch land in Montana that's irrigated. And I think, one concern I have is just that this is the type of land area that would be appealing, especially if it has access to generation or transmission, or they want to put in their own. So I think, with the reading I've done on this, I mean, Anne's issue on energy use is that's usually front and center of everyone's minds, and I think that's also the case with the data center developers, is that water is an afterthought. And so data centers are primarily driven by cheap power, high-speed fiber, and then favorable tax treatment, not water. And so I think we've seen that water has been an afterthought for a lot of these. And what I would like to leave with you tonight is that it doesn't have to be. And I think that's the goal, should be our goal as a state and community, is to really get out in front of this issue so we're prepared. And I think that looks like, I'll go back to that in a minute, asking a few questions before a project even gets off the ground. And folks need to know, the data center developers need to know that these are the questions that need answers before you come to Montana with regard to water anyway. And I think, one question is, how much water will the data center need for cooling and or power generation? What type of technology are you going to employ? We should require them to employ the least consumptive technology available. Where would that water supply come from? Does the site already have an existing water supply? Is there a water right already available to use at that site? If so, does the type of use, this new type of use you're proposing, fit within the four corners of that water right? What about wastewater? What pollutants will be in that wastewater? And infrastructure, what infrastructure is needed? You'll have to pay for that data center. And then I think there's some fundamental questions that we need to ask about that really get to kind of the limitations of our current laws now. And those are with regard to water, I think, is there already a water scarcity or a water quality issue in your area? And the Montana Water Use Act, which governs water rights, doesn't necessarily do a great job of kind of protecting our rivers and streams from these new types of demands. I mean, there are obviously requirements for new uses of water, but there's no kind of there's no hierarchy of uses in Montana water law, and so every type of water use is treated the same. And I think that's a question we should be asking ourselves as a state: is do we want to make sure our irrigators are protected, our recreation are protected, our rivers and streams flow? I just want to give quickly. We don't know a ton about the type of water or the amount of water proposed to be used at these three data centers I have on the slide. The Quantica data center that Anne mentioned is in Broadview, just north of Billings. There are very few details on the amount of water needed or where they would get the water. They have acknowledged that the town of Broadview certainly cannot supply water because there's I think it itself struggles to meet its own small community's water needs. So I've read that the project developer is looking at maybe using a deep underground well to tap the Madison Aquifer. And that's kind of the only specific thing I've heard. And so we do know that given the potential size, it could use a lot of water. I only have 3 minutes left. I'm going to skip ahead. Well, I'll go to Sabine. So the other two are very kind of specific. Saby Data Center in Butte has access to some water from Silver Lake, which comes from the Pentlers, and Butte Silverbow owns that water right, and it can be used for a variety of different sources or purposes. One, just notably, would be to provide water to the Upper Clark Fork River for fishery purposes, and I think it's been challenging to get Butte to commit to that type of water contract, but they're excited to provide water for a new data center. Cranboo, the one based here in Missoula County, I keep getting different numbers about the amount of water that Cranboo anticipates using, and I'd say I would speak with Missoula County. We have representatives here who have talked with the project developer, and to their credit have asked for and required them to report on the amount of water they'll be using before a decision's made on their special exception, which I think is amazing. But I think there are a lot of questions that need to be asked. Primarily, there's a water right on site now. It's a substantial water right, and it's conceivable that water right could be used already. It's a Blackfoot River water right. It could provide water to the new use. I think there's a big question about peak water use at the site, and we often see data centers average out the amount of water they use over the year, but we know they'll likely use the most water during the hot summer months. And that's the time when we all use the most water, and that's the time when our rivers and streams need the most water too. And so I think there need to be questions asked, like what exactly do you intend to use in the summer when the river's already really low? I'm, I think, out of time, unfortunately, but I'm just kidding, Derek. Derek's a real stickler up here, but I want to leave time for Amy because she has some really good things to say. I'm happy to talk about water rights with anyone after. It's not that exciting. The takeaway is that a water right for a data center is treated just like any other water right or water need. There are certain ways to get water. There's a new permit or new appropriation. You can change other existing water rights to your new use. You can purchase water from a municipal government or a water and sewer district. There are different ways to receive water. What I want to leave you with is that I don't think the Water Use Act is really up to kind of like getting, getting enough information about the type of demand that these data centers would have to really be protective over other water users and the system. So I'll stop with that.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here. And I know this is a lot and you might be feeling a little overwhelmed. This is a heady topic, it's a hard topic. There's lots of details and there's lots of overwhelm and fear around this topic. So I really appreciate you being here, and I really also appreciate the really hard work that Derek, Anne, and Barbara do day in and day out to figure this stuff out. So we have great community both here in the Missoula area and also across the state. And I think that's one reason why we have solutions and we have the people that can get ahead of AI in these hyperscale data centers, because we are one big community. These guys come over from Helena. And how many places have you traveled to talk data centers this last couple months? Like a dozen different talks. So we are all connected, and I think that's just really important. We are not alone in this. Okay, so my charge here is to just give a little bit of the local take here in Missoula and Missoula County. Why do we at Climate Smart Missoula care? I'm going to zoom out and talk about a few other communities, also some things that Anne and Barbara had mentioned. We'll zoom back in, and of course we'll talk about Bonner and a little bit more about what's happening there and some of the process, and then some opportunities and next steps for folks to be involved and to continue to build relationships and community. So I just wanted to offer why would a local climate organization like Climate Smart Missoula care so much about data centers. It's something in the last year we've gotten really involved in, to the extent that we can in our small staff of 4. But clearly the price of electricity matters. That Anne really surfaced all of the rising costs of electricity. And we at Climate Smart and with a cohort of others have been working to help people move off of fossil fuels and onto a green grid. Electrifying everything is the mantra for climate organizations and for efforts to deal with the climate emergency that we are in. We have a collaborative, electrifymissoula.org, an effort that we work with the city and the county and others to help people utilize clean electricity in their homes and businesses. So clearly, if the price of electricity skyrockets, that's not going to be very fair for people who have electrified their homes or want to. It's not fair for renters. People are going to get left behind if they can't afford to power their own home or business with solar on their roof. So there's equity issues. There's health and issues, trying to move ourselves to a healthier energy system. That transition is already hard enough. And now the incentives and rebates have been taken away by the federal government. Rising electricity prices make that work just that much harder. So we also really care because transparency matters. That slide that Anne provided with all those redacted, can't tell you any of this information, that is not okay. We have a constitutional right to know, and we have a constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. We all know that, and so that is why we have gotten involved in some of this petitions and rulemaking and potential litigation with a cohort of folks here, because they are threatening, they're not following our Constitution. Those NDAs are just not valid. We can have more information as a general public. So we have all across, of course, in Missoula and in Missoula County, 100% clean electricity and other climate goals, and this data centers directly impact. And we are collectively working for a healthy, resilient county, and we want that to be true for all of Missoula County and beyond. That health really matters. And of course, there's AI. The hyperscale data centers that we're talking about here are about AI, and we are scared, confused, don't know what to think about AI. And that's sort of the elephant in the room, and I'll return to that at the very end. So zooming out a bit, I did want to just mention some other communities. There are so many communities grappling with this and using different tactics, and we can learn from what others, both what threats they have in front of them, what tools they have, and also what they're doing. So a lot of advocacy, a lot of people coming together to varying successes depending on the laws and rules and regulations and jurisdictions in those places. But there's a lot, you can spend a lot of time going down rabbit holes on the internet just learning about what other communities are doing. I won't do too much of that. The Mr. Wonderful's Utah Data Center is the one that Barbara already described. There's also this kind of crazy situation in Memphis in, of course, the low-income disadvantaged Black communities where Elon Musk and his ex-AI data center, he just built it without permits and brought in, first it was just a couple gas-fired power plants, and then it was 15, and then they drew a drone over it, and there's like 27, and it's a little bit crazy without the permits. So again, these tech bros think that they can do things without following the rules, and I think we all, as Anne mentioned, this is bipartisan because we're kind of feeling like maybe everybody should follow the rules. And there are people, again, that are having success. The city of Reno just passed a moratorium. Moratoriums are happening, as has already been discussed, at the state and federal level. And those give people and entities time to sort out what their priorities are. So a lot of hope when you look around at other communities, and also a lot of challenges that makes you realize, wow, maybe it's good to be in Missoula County. There are some other options. When we talk about the AI hyperscales, I know that just gets overwhelming and big. I also know that there is a lot of discussion about how smaller, decentralized data centers could actually help the grid be more stable and efficient and smarter. They might not have to run 24/7 if they're not set up that way. They could actually serve the grid in times of need. That takes a lot of people working to use what we have out there in smarter and better ways. And I just wanted to point out that that is an option. You know, we used to do crypto mining in people's basements. Maybe we should be thinking about the data centers that we need to be a more distributed system and benefit more people. Again, I won't go into that. That's a whole nother panel discussion. I did want to just bring up, because we can't talk too much about what other communities are doing. We're not going to stay here all night. There's a really neat podcast from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Missoula was featured on it once a bunch of years ago, called Building Local Power. And I know folks here want to understand how we build local power, how we do this together, how we build relationships. And this is the podcast that just came out. There's like 4 or 5 of these. They introduce the issues. They talk more about some of the challenges other communities are going. And it just really gives you, it's, again, a lot, but it's also really inspiring what people around our country are doing to push back. And here's just one quote I pulled out from this ILSR pod. We start to uncover just how deeply this conflict is steeped in America's legacy of monopoly corporations versus motivated local communities. And we learn that one thing is certain: the corporate giants behind the data center boom better not underestimate the power of passionate and organized local resistance. So again, thank you for being here. So let's zoom in a little bit and go back in time just a little bit. I wanted to start because we do have specific regulations that Bonner and anybody in Missoula County proposing a data center have to follow. And that is because years ago, a bunch of people in our community and county got together and developed a 100% clean electricity goal and climate commitments from elected officials that they resolved to agree to. And our elected officials at that time, this is back in 2018, were really committed to climate, especially our county commissioners. And in order to deal with the fact that out in Bonner, there was a cryptocurrency mined and there was using already half of the electricity of our entire county, or a third, thank you. I'm looking at Jenny, who was intimately involved. We're thinking, all of us together, including our elected officials and people that work at the city and the county, well, how can we meet our goals if these cryptocurrency mining operations are going to expand and expand and expand? And so back in 2017, 2018, we had these commitments. The county folks, Jenny Dixon, who's here, and our old friend Diana Mineta, who is no longer here, she works in California, moved back, they worked incredibly hard to understand what could Missoula County do. They can't just pass an ordinance. They're not in the county, there are very strict rules of what you can do. They realized that what they could do is consider zoning. And they wanted to work fast, but you can't just enact zoning in quickly. Interim zoning that could give you some time to understand that unless there was an emergency. Our county commissioners recognize the emergency of climate change. The World Health Organization, Jenny just reminded me of this, had just declared climate change an emergency. And our county commissioners were brave enough to say that that matters. It is an emergency. And they developed interim regulations for cryptocurrency mining that went for a year, and then they extended them, and then they made them permanent because they cared. So who we elect matters. And their willingness to be, and the staff at our local government matters. Their willingness to work hard and be curious and come up with creative solution really matters. So we started there, and the cryptocurrency mining just uses a bunch of energy, and data centers are part of that. So we have now regulations. And again, I think people know that, but it's really worth looking back, and that was a brave thing to do. And as Anne said, we have the best regulations because nobody else has quite done what we've done here. We'd love this to be an example. We just need more brave county commissioners, I guess, out there. So the crypto mining at Bonner, industrial site, there's energy use, there's neighborhood health and environmental concerns. And again, these were all considered back in 2018, 19, and 2020. So just to make sure everybody's, I'll go through this pretty quickly, but clear about what's happening on Bonner. How many people are here because Bonner is of interest to them? Lots of people, maybe not everyone, right? But it is our extension, and it is Missoula County. So these regulations, we can allow data centers to, in Missoula County, in zoned industrial center heavy. That's kind of that's the designation. And they have specific zoning regulations. Again, these came out of this crypto mining regulations. All power must come from a new renewable energy source. It can't just come from a hydro dam that's already been in existence. It has to be new. It has to be additional. Because again, our elected officials, the county commissioners, and all of us thinking about climate want more clean energy, not just taking it from somebody else. And yeah, that's a longer story. I'll stop there. But the operation must recycle all electronic waste, and because it is within 500 feet of a residential area, must go through special exemption. And that's what we're going to talk just really quickly about, that they're trying to meet these special exemptions. And that's where we'll be making some decisions. So far, I'm not from Bonner, and I am not the expert on Bonner. There are people probably in this room and beyond that know more than I do. I've just been trying to compile a lot of what we know. But I do know that the neighborhood and folks in Bonner and the surrounding area are concerned about water and the Blackfoot River, as we just talked about, energy use, electricity pricing. Also, sound and noise, whether a heat dome would be created, lighting, traffic, waste disposal, air quality. And also, is this our only option for this industrial site? And, you know, I think that's a really hard one. I think a lot of us that have been working, trying to understand Bonner and talking to folks out there, it is really hard to have an industrial building that does not have manufacturing in it, because they've had to leave because we don't have affordable housing. We don't have affordable health care. We have bigger issues that need to be solved that could allow a regular manufacturing that creates jobs in this industrial center. They have a difficulty right now in trying to make manufacturing work there. Data center is an option. And I'm not here to say it's the right option or the wrong option. I'm just bringing out all these concerns. So as people know, the decisions about whether a data center is built by Crambu, that has a current proposal in, the decision is not made by the county commissioners. It is made by the Missoula the Missoula Consolidated County Land Use Board. I guess they call it the club. And they may consider the following in reviewing this special exception. So this is an appointed board, and these folks are doing the hard work of trying to understand everything from traffic to noise to water use to outdoor lighting, visual impacts, utility and infrastructure impacts, emergency access, fire protection, all of these things. They are considering this because it is a special exception, as mentioned, because it's within 500 feet of a residential area. So there's lots of regulations, and I'm not going to continue down that road of more and more of this details because, well, I'll get to this in a second, but a lot of this, I'll show you where all this information is if you're not already aware. But there are a lot of concerns, and there are ways to understand these concerns. So we do know at this point that Crambu has put in a permit. One thing I wanted to mention, we keep hearing different numbers, 3 megawatts, 5 megawatts, 29, 100. The site has, it doesn't really have access, but they have transmission to allow for up to 29 megawatts of power. It's not currently using that much power, but that's a substantial amount of power. Crambu's proposal is for less than that. They don't explicitly rule out increasing beyond 29, and there's been this 100 number thrown out. So I have been, again, talking to the folks that are living in Bonner or know more and more involved, and Gary Mattson is one of those people. Gary and Judy Mattson work incredibly hard. Not quite sure how they do this all. But I asked him, today we were talking about this site, and he mentioned that we are not, the proposal, the application that's put in, we are not sure if we know enough and if what we know is correct. So they're trying to understand it, trying to know what's working out, what could work out here. Are there any community benefits that could be accrued by having somebody, again, in this manufacturing facility? And there's just still a lot of questions. There are discrepancies within what they've put forward. And talking to Jenny Dixon, they have their final application in, and she also is finding many discrepancies. And people are emailing her and telling her about things that don't make sense, and a final plan that is suspiciously, or not suspiciously, just inadequate. So I can't say enough about how hard people that work in the county and in local government do for all of us. Jenny happened to tell me, I'm probably not supposed to say this, but she was up till 3 in the morning last night trying to understand what the heck was in front of her, right? So these people are working really hard. And all of the information about what's been proposed, what Cranboo has put forward already, can be found at Missoula County Voice and then Bonner Data Center. You can Google that, you can find it right away. And right there they have all the information. They have frequently asked questions that they answer, and then they have who's listening. And of course, who's listening is Jenny. Even has her phone number up there, sorry about that. And Svein Newman, who is the Climate Action Program Manager, and his job is to understand that when they say they're going to pull in clean, renewable energy, when and how and what's developed and what's proposed and what's promised and what does that all mean, and is that sufficient to meet the intent of the regulations. So those folks really are listening and are happy to answer questions. Do the work, go through the site, download everything, and then find out what your questions are, and those folks will help. So other folks, we've got folks on this panel that can offer more. MEIC, Ben Catton, is here in Missoula. He's walked around with the cards. Right there. He's also been working with a small group of people to better understand what is potential at this site. And then Common Good Missoula is an organizing group, an entity that works with a lot of different organizations. And Lisa Davey is also here. And she's been working with a lot of different folks. Oh, thank you. You're down in front. I thought you walked in the back. She's been also talking to a lot of different folks to understand what is proposed. If there's something real here that may or may not get passed, how could it actually benefit our community if it is at the right scale, if there's trust built, if there's honesty in what they propose to do. If not Cranboo, potentially others that could actually partner with our community to do something that is better than awful and maybe even good. And I don't know. None of us know. So just a couple more slides. We will, if you signed in out there, you're going to get these slides, so you don't have to write all this down. But to learn more and engage, again, there's the County Consolidated Land Use Board. They are scheduled right now to have a meeting on July 1st at 6 p.m. It's in person and virtual. Again, all that information is at MissoulaCountyVoice.com, Bonner Data Center, so you can learn more about Missoula County. You can talk to the county commissioners who are not the decision makers, but tell them thank you for doing this a bunch of years ago and then sticking to this commitment to climate and clean energy. There's also, speaking again, for follow-up, some of the things that Anne and Barbara talked about. There is an Governor's Energy Task Force meeting coming up, March. Oh, wait a minute.
We missed it.
That was old. That already happened. There's one May 20th. Okay, sorry. The slides have gotten recycled, and I didn't catch that one. We'll fix that. And then, of course, there's a Public Service Commission that you can call up and contact and write and talk to them. Attending their next meeting. They just went through the whole merger, and so there was a lot of public comment and participation in that. But there are ways to follow up both locally and at the state. We'll stop there. And then I wanted to just finish by offering that a lot of people are very concerned about data centers, and a lot of people are both very concerned and potentially even curious or excited about AI. I'll put myself in the more fearful but also a little bit curious position. And there is a new Montana effort because we can't just ignore AI. I mean, we can. We've got other issues we're working on. But at some point, there are some folks in our community that have said, I can't just ignore this. It is something that is looming and that is hard. So Chrissy McMullen is here in the back. Is Jason here? Jason Weiner, that folks might know. He's been in our community and was on city council for ridiculously number of years. Thank you for your service. Those folks have started this AIrealist.org is the current name. They're basically trying to understand what could we do about AI in our community? Are there certain guardrails that we could establish in our state? What could be done to make AI not be such a threat? Thank you. I was going to say something worse than that, but I think there's utility to AI that people are using it every day, right? Like I spend most of my day turning it off, and then I look at a friend who's now went through a cancer treatment that may or may not have been enabled by AI. Let's be honest, his current health is because of this technologies. So we do need to grapple with it. It wasn't the point of this conversation, but they tried to have a conversation around AI, and everybody wanted to talk about data centers. So I just want to make the point that they are linked, and we do need to understand them. And there are some curiously good things that could come out of either a data center or AI, but it's up to all of us to make that happen.